The world has many strange and dangerous spots on the map, but this place is particularly interesting. In the very center of a desert in Central Asia, a fiery hole the size of a football field has been blazing for more than half a century. Temperatures there reach 1,000 degrees Celsius. Flames shoot up as high as a 5-story building, and you can hear the roar for kilometers. Local residents call this place the gates to hell and avoid it. Even local animals feared approaching it, and one daredevil in a fireproof suit descended to the very bottom and discovered something no one expected. They tried extinguishing the crater with concrete, proposed detonating a nuclear bomb, wanted to flood it with liquid nitrogen. Nothing worked. But this year, something happened that few believed possible. How did a Soviet mistake turn into one of the planet's main attractions? What creatures live in the hellish heat at a temperature of 400 degrees Celsius? And why did this discovery excite astrobiologists? Why did all attempts to extinguish the crater end in failure? Is it true that this burning pit in the desert affected the climate of the entire planet? And why did the country's president order the crater closed urgently by any means necessary? In the middle of a desert, where daytime temperatures rise to 50 degrees Celsius, a huge hole half the size of a football field blazes. And the heat is so intense that approaching closer than 250 meters is simply impossible. This is a real place in Turkmenistan that has burned for more than 50 years. And most surprisingly, someone set it on fire deliberately. The Darvaza crater, or as local residents call it, the gates to hell. The name speaks for itself. At night, this place looks absolutely terrifying. You can see the glow for kilometers. The fire roars like thousands of jet engines, and the temperature at the bottom reaches 1,000 degrees Celsius. The story began in 1971. The Soviet Union still existed back then, and geologists actively searched for oil and gas throughout the country's territory. Turkmenistan ranks 4th in the world in natural gas reserves, so interest in this region was enormous. A group of Soviet scientists arrived in the Karakum Desert. They chose a location for drilling not far from a small village and began work. Everything proceeded according to plan until something unforeseen happened. The geologists struck an underground cavity in the rock that formed long ago when lava saturated with gas solidified. But most terrifying, a gigantic natural gas deposit under a pressure of about 300 atmospheres sat underground. Literally, within minutes, an enormous crater 70 meters in diameter and 20 meters deep formed. This is like a 7-story building. The entire drilling rig, equipment, transport, everything collapsed into this hole. By fortunate chance, none of the people suffered harm. The workers managed to run away, but gas began escaping from the pit, methane and hydrogen sulfide, deadly dangerous substances that could poison all life within a radius of many kilometers. And here, Soviet geologists had to make a decision whose consequences we observe to this day. They had two options: either try somehow to close this hole or ignite the escaping gas. The first option proved extremely expensive and technically complex, so they chose the second. The logic was simple. The gas will burn out in a few weeks, a month at most. The fire will extinguish itself and the problem will resolve. But they catastrophically underestimated the scale of this place. When they ignited the gas, something unimaginable began. Flames 10 to 15 meters high shot up from the crater. The temperature around jumped so high that metal melted. And most importantly, the fire didn't begin to go out. Days, weeks, months passed. The crater continued to blaze. Every day, 10 to 12 million cubic meters of gas burned in this fiery hole. If you convert this to money at today's prices, it comes out to about 700,000 euros daily. Over all the years of burning, billions of cubic meters of the most valuable resource burned there. It simply went up in smoke, quite literally. Local residents were in shock. Animals began avoiding this place. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, a practically dead zone formed. Nothing grew, and no one lived. Authorities tried to understand what to do with this problem, but there was no solution. And in 2004, they simply demolished the village of Darvaza, which gave its name to the crater. Authorities relocated all residents to other regions of Turkmenistan for safety reasons. By this time, the crater had already become a legend. Rumors began circulating about it. Locals superstitiously called it the gates to hell and tried to stay far away. But foreign tourists, on the contrary, began traveling specifically to Turkmenistan to see this incredible spectacle with their own eyes. Interestingly, no one knows exactly when they ignited the crater. According to the official version, this happened in 1971, immediately after the collapse, but some local residents claim that actually they only ignited the gas in the early 80s. So, for more than 10 years, poisonous fumes simply escaped into the atmosphere, poisoning everything around. However it may be, by the early 2000s, the gates to hell had turned into a genuine attraction. Thousands of tourists from around the world came here annually. Hollywood directors used footage of the burning crater in disaster films. National Geographic made a documentary about it, and marketers even applied these photos in an advertising campaign for the Godzilla reboot. But Turkmen authorities found themselves in a difficult position. On one hand, the crater brought income from tourism. On the other, environmentalists kept sounding the alarm. The fiery hole throws enormous amounts of methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Moreover, billions of cubic meters of the most valuable natural gas were burning uselessly, which could have been sold abroad. In 2010, Turkmenistan's president publicly stated for the first time that something needed to be done about the burning crater. He assigned scientists to develop an extinguishing program, but the task proved incredibly complex. How do you extinguish a fire blazing at a depth of 20 meters at a temperature of 1,000 degrees Celsius? How do you cut off gas access when a gigantic deposit with a branched network of underground channels sits underground? Scientists proposed several options. The first, most radical, use a directed nuclear explosion. Sounds like madness, but in the Soviet Union, this method was actually applied to extinguish gas fires. For example, in 1966 at the Ortabulak deposit in Uzbekistan, a flare burned that they couldn't extinguish for more than 3 years. Then specialists drilled an inclined well, lowered a thermonuclear charge with a power of 30 kilotons there, and detonated it at a depth of 1.5 kilometers. 22 seconds after the explosion, the flare that had raged for 1,000 days went out. The rock simply compressed, gas access stopped. But the situation with Darvaza is more complex. The crater is too large, and the geological structure of the deposit is extremely complex. Many thin rock layers lie not deep from the surface, only up to a kilometer. If you detonate a nuclear charge incorrectly, you could conversely open new pathways for gas escape, as happened in 1981 at the Kumzhinskoye deposit in Russia. There, the explosion caused a man-made earthquake, new faults and cracks appeared, and river water flooded a huge territory. Therefore, they decided to abandon this nuclear explosion idea. The second option? Flood the crater with concrete. Technically, this is possible, but extremely dangerous. Russian geologist Vladimir Polovanov warned that if you seal the crater, gas will begin accumulating under the concrete plug. Sooner or later, the pressure will become critical and the most powerful explosion will occur. Moreover, no one can predict exactly where it will happen. The gas is light. It will pass through cracks in the earth for hundreds of meters and burst out in a completely unexpected place. The consequences could be even more terrible. The third option, install a huge dome over the crater that will collect gas. But the force with which gas is burst from underground could simply tear apart any structure. There were also quite exotic ideas, for example, flooding the crater with liquid nitrogen to cool the rock and block the channels. But this would require monstrous volumes of nitrogen, which, moreover, evaporates quickly. While scientists pondered a solution to the problem, in November 2013, an event occurred that attracted the attention of the entire world to the crater. Canadian traveler and researcher George Kourounis decided on an incredible experiment. He became the first person to descend to the bottom of the gates of hell. Kourounis prepared for this insane undertaking for a year and a half. He assembled a team of specialists, obtained all necessary permissions from Turkmen authorities, and even developed special equipment. National Geographic provided funding for the expedition. The main task was to take soil samples from the crater's bottom and determine whether life is possible there under such extreme conditions. Kourounis began descending. When he found himself at the bottom, reality exceeded all expectations. He took soil samples, conducted video filming, and safely ascended to the top. And then the most interesting stage began: analysis of what he brought from the bottom of the gates of hell, and the results proved fascinating. Researchers discovered living organisms in the soil samples, thermophilic bacteria that feel perfectly comfortable at temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius. These microorganisms don't occur anywhere else on Earth's surface. They live only in this crater, in the very inferno, where seemingly nothing living can exist. Where did these bacteria even come from? They couldn't have appeared after 1971. Evolution doesn't work that way. So they existed in underground cavities even before geologists drilled the well. Thus, Koronis' find gave new impetus to debates about what to do with the crater. On one hand, this is a unique natural laboratory complex where you can study life under extreme conditions. On the other, an environmental catastrophe that has continued for half a century. Turkmenistan's authorities faced a difficult choice. But before we move on to what they ultimately did with this crater, we need to look at whether other similar places exist on the planet. And actually, I'll say that the Darvaza story is far from unique. All over the world, similar places exist where natural gas or coal burns for years and even centuries. And the scale of some of these fires staggers the imagination. Take, for example, the town of Centralia in the American state of Pennsylvania. In 1962, local authorities decided to clean up a garbage dump in the simplest way: burn it. The dump sat directly above an old coal mine, and fire seeped into underground tunnels. The coal caught fire and burns to this day for more than 60 years now. Underground temperatures reach 600 degrees Celsius. Poisonous smoke pours from cracks in the asphalt. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy fell into a hole that suddenly opened beneath his feet. They saved him by miracle. After that, authorities began evacuating the town. By our time, only a few people remain there who flatly refused to leave. Everyone else left. They demolished homes, removed the postal code from the registry. Now it's an official ghost town. Geologists calculated that the coal under Centralia will last another 200 to 300 years of burning. Extinguishing the fire is impossible. It stretched through old tunnels for kilometers in all directions. The only thing you can do is wait until all the coal burns out. Incidentally, this very town inspired the creator of the game and film Silent Hill. Smoke spreading through the streets, abandoned houses, the atmosphere of a town slowly descending into the underworld. All of this is copied from a real story. Or take Yanar Dag, the burning mountain in Azerbaijan. This is a hillside that has burned for several centuries. Natural gas seeps from underground. Marco Polo wrote about this place back in the 15th century. So the mountain has blazed for at least 700 years, and maybe longer. In India, in the Jharia coal basin, fires in the mines have blazed for more than 100 years. About 70 coal seams burn there simultaneously. Smoke and poisonous gases poison the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. But coal extraction in the region continues. And in Australia, there's an absolute record holder, Mount Wangan, or the Burning Mountain. The coal seam beneath it has burned for about 6,000 years. This is a natural fire that began long before human civilization appeared. Scientists calculated that at this rate the fire will continue for several more thousand years until all the coal in this area burns out. What unites all these places? Human helplessness before an element that they themselves created. In January 2022, Turkmenistan's president returned again to the crater question. This time he was categorical. The gates of hell must be extinguished. But how exactly to extinguish it still remained a mystery, since all previous attempts ended in failure. Then scientists from the state company Turkmengas proposed a completely new approach. Instead of trying to extinguish the flame directly, they decided to cut off the crater's gas supply itself. The idea consisted of the following: drill new wells near the crater and begin active gas extraction from the same deposit. If you pump out gas faster than it flows to the crater, pressure in underground channels will decrease, gas inflow will diminish, the flame will begin weakening, and ultimately the crater will simply extinguish itself. The method seemed risky, but there were no other options. In 2023, project implementation began. Specialists drilled several new wells around the crater and launched old mothballed developments. forced gas extraction began. And, to many people's surprise, the method worked. In 2024, satellite observations recorded that flame intensity in the crater began decreasing. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible, but with each month, they became increasingly obvious. By 2025, at an international conference in Ashgabat, scientists from Turkmenistan presented new data. According to satellite monitoring systems, the size of flame in the crater decreased 3 times compared to the original, and methane emissions dropped so much that instruments now barely detect them. This means that the legendary gates of hell, which blazed for 50 years, may soon extinguish forever. Or not. If the forced gas extraction method continues working just as effectively, in a few years, the flame may extinguish completely, and then one of the planet's most amazing attractions will disappear. In its place will remain simply a large hole in the desert. The story of the Darvaza crater is a story about how human error can lead to consequences lasting many years. Soviet geologists made a decision that seemed reasonable at that moment. They couldn't foresee that the fire would blaze for more than half a century. They couldn't suppose that their actions would create one of the world's most famous places. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos.